There is an event in Nigeria's history lexicon described as the revenge coup. Others call it the counter coup. The question here is, why was the coup described as such? Who were the participants in the coup? What was their mission? What did they achieve in the coup? A further question can also be asked, namely, were the executors of the counter coup arrested and tried? These and many more are the questions to be addressed in this video. In this video, we take you back in time to the events of the second military coup which took place in Nigeria and which has been described by many as the revenge coup. In Back in History, we take you back in time to the events that occurred in the historical past. Welcome to this edition of Back in History. The year 1966 was a critical year in the history of Nigeria. It was the year that Nigeria witnessed two bloody military coups in quick successions. While the first coup was executed in January 1966, the second coup was executed in July of the same year. These events would shape and change the course of Nigeria's military, economic, and political history forever. The first military coup was led by majors of the Nigerian army. They were Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogu, Major Emmanuel Fajuyi, Major Christian Anuforo, Major Timothy Onwatuegu, Major Donatus Okafor, Major Humphrey Chukwuka, and lastly, Major Adewale Ademoyega. Most of these persons were from the then eastern region of Nigeria. Only Adewale was from the western region. The composition of the names of the coup plotters did not help the narrative that followed the coup, especially when the names were placed side by side with the names of the persons killed in the coup. About 90% of the victims were from the north. This did not go down well with the soldiers from the northern region of the country. The coup was seen as an attack against the north. Some soldiers from the north then planned a revenge coup. This is where the coup derived its name as the revenge coup, otherwise known by many as the counter coup. The first military coup was bloody, so also was the revenge coup. In the first coup, about 90% of the persons killed were northern elites. In the second coup, all the persons killed were elites from the south. No northerner was killed by the coup plotters in the second military coup. It was indeed a revenge coup. The country became polarized the more, and all was not going to be the same again for a long time to come. There was palpable fear in the country, and no one knew what was going to happen next. There was ethnic distrust across the country. The southerner did not trust the northerner, and the northerner did not trust the southerner. Yet, both sides of the country were expected and bound to continue to live together as one. General Ironsi, who was the most senior military officer at the time and the general officer commanding the Nigerian army, became the military head of state following the failure of the first military coup. The executors of the coup were arrested and detained. Ironsi appointed military governors and began the administration of the country with them. But there was tension, disquiet, and civil disturbances in many parts of the country, especially in the north, as a direct fallout of the killings in the first military coup. In his efforts to restore peace to the country, Ironsi took a decision to make a tour of the country and have discussions with traditional rulers and leaders of thought. This singular decision will cost Ironsi's life in less than 6 months into his presidency. A timetable was drawn for the tour, and the tour was scheduled to start from the western region of Nigeria, precisely in Ibadan, which was the capital of the region. Ironsi left his residence in Lagos in the company of some staff of the army headquarters and his personal security aides. The date of their departure from Lagos to Ibadan was July 28, 1966. They arrived safely in Ibadan and were received by the military governor of the western region, Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi. The meeting with the royal fathers and leaders of thought held successfully as was scheduled. After the meeting, Ironsi had an option to return to Lagos but decided to spend the night at the government house in Ibadan, where Colonel Fajuyi was his host. He later went to bed. Unknown to him, he was not going to wake up to continue in office as military head of state of Nigeria. His tenure was ending in no time. His life was also ending in just a matter of hours. In the early hours of 29th July 1966 at about 4 or 5 a.m., the government house Ibadan was invaded by a group of soldiers led by then Major T.Y. Danjuma. The soldiers on duty at the government house were disarmed and their weapons taken over by soldiers loyal to T.Y. Danjuma. Danjuma was now the man in charge. He arrived to the government house in the company of soldiers who were loyal to him and who were simply waiting for his orders. Danjuma's soldiers positioned themselves strategically around the building and got ready for a showdown. Danjuma was barely 26 years old at the time. Ironically, Danjuma came from Lagos to Ibadan in the entourage of the head of state as a staff of the army headquarters. He worked closely with the head of state in the army headquarters and knew his itinerary with all the details. He was an executor from within, but this was not known to the head of state. There was no aspect of the movement of the head of state that he was not aware of. This made it easy for him to execute the plan with precision, without missing a point and without embarking on guesswork. His mission was to arrest the head of state in Ibadan, a most senior military officer to him and his commander-in-chief in the army. It was unimaginable, but Danjuma had a plan, and for him, the plan was to be executed at all costs. On seeing some unusual movements around the premises of the government house and sensing that something was not just right, Colonel Adekule Fajuyi, the military governor and host of the head of state, sent some soldiers that were with them in the main building to go out and see what exactly was going on. One of the soldiers that was sent out was Air Force Captain Andrew Nwankwo, who was one of the ADCs to General Lagoye Ironsi. As he went out, he was arrested by Danjuma's men, disarmed, and made to sit on the floor. Every other person that emerged from the main building, which was a story building, was treated the same way, and no one returned to the building to brief Fajuyi and Ironsi of what exactly was going on. Fajuyi then decided to come out by himself. At this point, T.Y. Danjuma had already advanced to the main building. As Fajuyi came down the staircase, he met Danjuma, who saluted him as a senior officer, but who immediately told him that he is under arrest. Fajuyi knew as a soldier that anything could happen to him at that point. He thus raised his hands and came down peacefully and asked Danjuma what he wanted. Danjuma responded, quote, "We want to arrest the head of state and leave the government house with him," end of quote. It is reported that Colonel Fajuyi pleaded with him not to go up the staircase with armed soldiers, that he was going to go up and call General Ironsi for him, but that he, Danjuma, should please guarantee him the safety of Ironsi, his guest and head of state of Nigeria at the time. Danjuma guaranteed the needed safety. Colonel Fajuyi then went upstairs to discuss with General Ironsi, but did not return to Danjuma immediately. Danjuma then climbed up with a grenade in his hands. He met Ironsi with Fajuyi discussing together, and Danjuma, it is reported, immediately told Ironsi that he was under arrest and gave him the marching orders to stand up. This was a major commanding not just a general but the head of state of the country and his direct boss. This was extremely unusual, but that day was an unusual day. Reluctantly, General Lagoye Ironsi stood up as commanded. At this time, the soldiers that came with Danjuma were on hand to obey whatever was required of them by Danjuma. There was danger everywhere. Ironsi was led downstairs and forced into a waiting vehicle, a Land Rover. It is reported that Colonel Fajuyi was not the target and was thus not commanded to join the waiting vehicle. But some reports say that Colonel Fajuyi could not fold his arms and watch his guest being taken away, and thus decided to join in the vehicle in the belief that the captors would see reason to have a change of mind. For him, he never thought that the head of state was going to be killed. At most, he thought that he was to be removed from power and replaced with another soldier and perhaps detained in prison or any other custody. But Colonel Fajuyi was wrong. The duo of Fajuyi and the head of state were driven to an unknown destination. That was the last time these two men were seen alive together. They were driven to a place called Lalukbon on the outskirts of Ibadan. They were brought out of the vehicle, a Land Rover, taken into the bush and shot. It is reported that before they were shot, Fajuyi ran between the soldiers and spread his hands, begging them not to kill Ironsi. Fajuyi literally prevented them from shooting Ironsi for several minutes and kept begging them. He repeated the intervention so much that the killers became frustrated and angrily fired shots at Fajuyi and Ironsi together. Fajuyi is thus said to have died in defense of a friend and compatriots. Unfortunately, neither Fajuyi nor Ironsi survived the arrest of 29th July 1966 to confirm this narrative, but the undisputed truth is that both men, General Aguiyi Ironsi and Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi, lost their lives on the 29th day of July at a place called Lalukbon in 1966 in a coup that was led by soldiers from the northern region of Nigeria. This event ended forever the lives, career, and times of two of the earliest foreign trained and highly experienced Nigerian military officers, General Johnson Aguiyi Ironsi and Colonel Francis Adekunle Fajuyi. Analysts have said that the coup plot had already been in place before the Ibadan visits, that the smooth execution of the coup and the coordination between officers in Ibadan and Lagos showed clearly that the coup had already been planned and was only waiting for an opportunity for the planners to strike. When it was clear that Ironsi had effectively been taken out of the way, the next phase in the coup was to choose a successor from the remaining senior military officers. Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, a Christian from the northern region of the country and Chief of Staff to General Ironsi, was chosen as the new head of state of Nigeria. It is said that his choice as the new head of state annoyed some of the senior northern soldiers such as Murtala Mohammed, who was keenly interested in the said office. This anger would later play out some years after, as Murtala Mohammed would also seize power from Yakubu Gowon in 1975, but in a bloodless military coup. The other officers that participated in the coup were rewarded with key military appointments by the Gowon administration. Lieutenant Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi was born on 26 June 1926. He was from Ado-Ekiti in present-day Ekiti State. Originally a teacher and clerk, Fajuyi joined the Nigerian Army in 1943. He was trained at the Eton Hall Officer Candidate School in the United Kingdom. He served in the Congo, and on return to Nigeria, he became the first indigenous military commander of the 1st Battalion Enugu, Nigeria, which had all along been commanded by British officers. When Major General Aguiyi Ironsi became the head of state, he appointed military governors for the regions, and Fajuyi was appointed as governor of the Western region, where Fajuyi was from. Fajuyi is remembered by many as a gallant soldier who served his country with commitment, loyalty, and dedication. The 2nd Division of the Nigerian Army Ibadan is officially known as Adekunle Fajuyi Cantonment, named in honor of Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi. General Aguiyi Ironsi was born on 3rd March 1924. Ironsi had his primary and secondary education in Umuahia, Calabar, and Kano, respectively, and at the age of 18, he enrolled in the then Nigerian Regiment as a private. He later proceeded to the Staff College, Camberley, England. He served as commandant of the 5th Battalion Kano, served at the Congo under the United Nations, and later served as military attaché to the Nigerian High Commission in London. He rose through the ranks and became a major general in 1965, and in the same year, he became the general officer commanding the Nigerian Army. On being killed at Lalukbon in Ibadan in July 1966, his mortal body was hurriedly buried in a shallow grave. He was later exhumed from the shallow grave and properly buried with full military honors and in accordance with the funeral rites of the Catholic Church, where Ironsi was a devout worshipper. He was 42 years old when he became the military head of state of Nigeria, and also 42 at the time of his assassination. Ironsi was only in power for 6 months. One of the reasons advanced in support of the counter-coup was that General Ironsi did not constitute a military court-martial to try the executors of the first military coup. This indeed was true. The executors of the coup were only arrested and locked up in prison. This was considered bad enough. But the question is, were the executors of the second military coup arrested and prosecuted? The answer is in the negative. They were not arrested, let alone prosecuted. They continued in their military duties and received promotions when due. The distrust in the country continued, and when the causes of the Nigeria-Biafra Civil War are listed, the first and second military coup are usually listed as the primary reasons that ignited the war, which raged on for 3 unbroken years with scores of lives lost on the sides of Nigeria and Biafra. Nigeria as a country has indeed been through a lot. Thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel for regular notification on every new video. I am your friend and host Ekemini Udim, wishing you the best of time in all you do.